Hi, welcome to Paint It Friday. This is Colorful Creative Watercolors. I'm Laurie. And if you followed us along on Sketch It Tuesday, you already have your template drawn on your greeting card for Mother's Day. So what I'm doing is I am taping down my template to my Lightbox. And if you don't have a Lightbox, you can use a sunny window. And then I'm taking my watercolor paper and then I'm going to tape that over top. And as you can see, my template is shining through there that I can trace it on. I decided to move my paper, and actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my 9 by 12 inch cold press watercolor paper. I'm going to cut it in half because it will actually fit on there better, and it won't be so much wastage of watercolor paper. So if you're using a 9 by 12, you can just fold that in half and then you can just cut that. What I do is I crease it really well and then I just tear it. Um, it it always tears very nicely for me. But you can do what you want. You can use the whole piece of paper, but for depending what size you're using. But like I said, I'm using a 9 by 12, cutting it in half, and that lays perfectly over top there because you can see there's still enough room where we'll have to cut the card at the end to make it into a greeting card that will fit into a greeting card envelope. So now that I have that in place, I'm going to tape that down, and I'm just using regular Scotch tape because I'm not worried it won't rip my paper because I'm not going to be taking paint all the way down there. So I'm just taping that onto my Lightbox. My Lightbox, I keep accidentally turning it off. If you don't have a Lightbox, I suggest you get one if you're going to do a lot of tracing because they're great. You can get them on Amazon. They're not very expensive and they work beautifully. But a sunny window will do just as well. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the outline of the card. So I know that when we're finished, I know where to cut it. So I'm just doing a pencil outline. I'm just using the piece that I cut, that I cut off. I'm using that as my straight edge, or you can use a ruler or what have you. But that was handy, and that's what I'm going to use. So like I said, I'm tracing the outline of the card. So when we're finished, we can cut it out, and then we can fold it and turn it into a greeting card. So while we're doing this, normally I already have my things already sketched out for Paint It Friday, but I wanted you to see this process of how I trace my images onto my watercolor paper. And there's nothing wrong with tracing. Not everything has to be done freehand. I trace a lot of things. I pre-draw it first and then I trace it and put it on my Lightbox and then paint. So there you can see the outline of the card. Okay, so we'll turn the Lightbox back on, and now we're just tracing it. If you already have this step done, you can skip ahead to where we start painting. But I will mention the colors that we'll be using. So don't go too far ahead because you don't want to miss what the colors are. So we were just tracing that. So what I'm doing, if you can trace lightly, that's fine, because once I'm done tracing this, I'm going to lightly take my eraser over it so my pencil lines are a little lighter. But because I don't want to have a lot of harsh lines in with my in this painting. All right, so while we're doing that, just a reminder, if you're watching this and are not a member of my Facebook group, Watercolor tutorials and inspiration. I encourage you to join every other Tuesday and every other Friday. We do a sketch at Tuesday, and then we do a paint at Friday, where we paint that sketch on Friday, which we're doing right now. I would love to have you join, and I would love to see your creations of what we've painted. So yes, it's watercolor tutorials and inspiration. I will have a link down below for this. And also, if you did not get your, if you're not a member of the Facebook group, and you did not get your greeting card template, that will also be linked down below, that you can grab that and download it. So now I have it traced. I'm just taking my eraser, going over it lightly to get rid of the harsh pencil lines, because like I said, I don't want a lot of them to show through. All right, so I'm going to show you the colors we're going to be using, and the first color we're going to be using is should be violet. So I'm just getting that mixed up. And any second now, I will be painting on that violet color. We're just going to do some color swatches here so you can see exactly what we're using. I must be having technical difficulty because this is taking longer than I thought it was. Here we go. So there is our violet color. And then our next color, quite honestly, I can't remember the order that I put these in. I do believe it is, well, I'll tell you, it's either going to be lemon yellow or sap green. Because in our pansies, when you're doing the violet colors, they have that yellow point through. So there is our yellow. That is lemon yellow. And then the next color should be sap green. Now, if you don't have these exact colors, you know, any color that's violety looking, any color, I'm sorry, this color here is indigo. We're going to be using indigo in this as in with our greens when we do a little bit of glazing. Then, of course, the last color will be sap green. So it is violet, it is lemon yellow, it is indigo, and it is sap green. And those are the four colors that we will be using for this Paint It Friday Mother's Day floral card. So we're going to get started, and what I'm going to do is we're going to do a wet on wet. I'm getting my paper towel ready. We're going to do a wet on wet, so I'm going to fill in that first petal with just wet wet paper, a wet brush with clean, clear water. And we're just painting in those. I did the opposites first. Didn't need to do that. I advise, though, to stay within the lines of the petal so they don't all blend together as we do this. So we're going to dip into our violet, and we're just going to drop that violet in there and just watch how those colors dance. I love wet on wet with making florals. So we're just dropping that in there. And we're going to do the same thing for all the rest of the petals. So we'll get some more clear water. Fill in, and you see how I'm staying away from the actual, I don't want it to touch with the other one, or like I said, it will all bleed in together. You can go to the outer part of it, but on the inner part of the petals, you want to stay away from your other water line, or like I said, it will all blend together. So we just drop some more pigment in there. And if you feel you have too much pigment, I just put my paintbrush on my paper towel, just dabbed it on there, that I'm using that excess paint to pull out from that that purple. So I'm just grabbing my paper towel because I want to lift some of that out. I didn't want it quite so dark. It's the beauty of watercolor. You can just lift some of that paint right out of there so it's not so dark. And then you can see, just pull some of that and put it over on your other petal. I'm going to grab a little bit more pigment. So right now, the first coating of this is done. But before we move on to the next flower, while that's still wet, we want to grab our lemon yellow. We want to drop our lemon yellow in there because what we want is in the center, we want that lemon yellow to, as you can see, because it's still wet, it will feather out into the petals. And that's, yeah. So then we'll do the exact same thing on our other flower. We will do the clear water wash with the wet on wet. And I just went ahead and just did all the petals. I didn't go like across from each other when I started. But I'm just making sure that I'm staying within the lines because like I said, we don't want that water to bleed next to each other. And so we'll just keep going with that. And then we'll grab some more of that violet color. And just drop it in there. So I'm just dropping it in and then I'll smooth it out. So we'll just complete this step. And if you enjoy doing florals, I do have a Patreon page, and I have a $4 a month pledge membership called the Coffee Club. And in June, we're going to be doing a whole botanical series. The whole month of June will be a course on, I think it'll be a 6-video course on watercolor botanical journaling, which we will be learning how to make botanicals. So if it's something you'd like, I encourage you to check out my Patreon page. Please note that it is new, so I don't have a whole lot on there yet, but every month I will be adding a new course along with some freebies. So we're just dropping in that yellow once again. And as you can see how that yellow just feathers out into the purple, which is when you're thinking of pansies, the purple pansies with the purple and yellow, that's the effect we're going for. So now I'm just smoothing out some of that where that harsh purple is, smoothing out those edges. And there we have, the pansies aren't done, but we do have that first coating on. So now it's time to head on to our foliage. And we will be grabbing some of that sap green. And we will just be doing, and this is just a wet on dry, and you can see I'm doing the point and drag on the leaves there. Just use your point and then drag, point and then drag. And this is just sap green. And it is the wet on dry. Those I'm just kind of painting in. And by the way, I am using a number 2 paintbrush. I did not mention that in the beginning. It should be down in the description of the video, but I am using a number 2 round brush. Most of the time when I paint, if I use a number 2 round or a number 6 and or a number 8 round. Those are my favorite brushes to use. So there I'm just doing that point and drag, use the point and then drag, point and then drag. You're just taking the belly of that brush when you're dragging it, then using your point to make that little stem there at the end of the leaf. And just an FYI, you can't see it. In my left hand, I'm holding on to a paper towel where I a lot of times blot my paintbrush into. So now we're just going to create the rest of that stem coming out from the flower. And that is pretty much a vertical hold with just a light touch with the tip of your paintbrush. If you're having trouble making thin lines, just have a practice piece of a watercolor paper beside you and just practice making your lines on that. If you're nervous about making the thin lines, you can always practice your strokes before you actually put it on your piece that you're making. I usually always have a scrap piece next to me just to test if there's something I'm not sure of or a technique I'm not sure of. I like to try it out first on my scrap paper just to make sure that I'm getting the knack of it. So now I'm just taking a little bit of a darker of the same purple, but I did mix it with a little bit of the indigo. And I'm just kind of making that center in there a little bit defined. So it's some violet mixed with indigo. And indigo is basically a bluish gray tint, or color, I should say, or pigment. Now I'm taking just my violet, a more concentrated version of my violet, and I'm going around some of my edges. And what we'll be doing is we'll be smoothing them in there so those lines aren't so harsh. But I just want to define where some shadow is on these pansies. So you see how I have my paper towel there, and what I'm doing is my brush is clean and it's just damp. That's why I wiped it on my paper towel. And now you see how I'm just kind of blending that in there so it's not quite so harsh, but yet creating some shadow and also using some of that paint to give the pansy a little bit more definition. So we're just shading that in and then wiping off that brush. But there should be no paint on the brush. It should be a clean brush that is just damp. So I have to turn that around a little bit. And we'll continue to do that with all of those lines. You're just blending that in there. Wiping off my brush. Just trying to create some shadow so you know that that larger petal is in the back and those other petals are more front. Then I'm just kind of giving a little bit of texture using what a little bit I have on the brush of the paint from doing that blending, just to make some texture on the flowers, on the petals. So now it's time to go over to the second flower. And we'll do the same thing with these petals. It's just a clean, damp brush that I rinsed in my rinse water and wiped off on my paper towel, and now I'm just kind of blending it in. Because we're just trying to create a little bit of shadow, just to give a little bit of depth and dimension. And then, like I said, I'm using what transfers onto the brush to go onto the petals to give them a little bit more character without having to grab any paint from my palette. So we just keep smoothing that in. Now I'm going to bring some of those little lines out that you see on the pansies in with that yellow. And I'm pretty much pulling some of the paint that's already there. I'm just pulling it and making use of that paint because, like I said, my brush is just damp. And I wasn't happy with that shading, so we're just going to go in there and just do a little bit more with that. So I hope you're following along with me and creating your Mother's Day pansies. I remember when I was a young girl, at Sunday school, we would always get a little pansy on Mother's Day Sunday for Sunday school to take home to our moms for Mother's Day. That was always fun. So I'm still just trying to put in some of those little lines. Like I said, my brush is just damp, and I'm just pulling from the paint that's already there. Now I grabbed a little bit more yellow, and I'm just a little bit of yellow, and I'm just defining some more of those lines. You see how I'm just bringing them out a little bit just to make it stand out a little bit more. So I put some yellow on my paintbrush, not a lot of water, mostly just pigment, and just pulled some of that yellow out. So our pansies are taking shape there. And now I'm taking some indigo and I'm going in there with that just to make some little spots and little dots for the center of that flower. And that's just indigo. All right. Now it should be time to start defining our leaves a little bit. So once again, it's just indigo. I'm using that to go on to the green. Like I said, because the indigo is a blue-gray, it complements the green perfectly. I'm just putting some lines in there, and then we're going to blend those lines as well. And this could be pretty much what you would call glazing, because we're adding on another layer. And we're going to just go down and just kind of redefine those stems, because what it does, it just gives it another look, another texture, another dimension to it. So it's just not flat, so it doesn't look flat. So you see how I wiped off my brush, and then I'm just going to kind of blend that indigo into that green. So we'll keep doing that. Blend that in there. And we'll do that with all of the petals. And then once we have that done with all of the petals, I'm going to pull some of that, the indigo that's already on there, and then we're going to make little veins in there. You see how I'm just making some veins going in through coming out from the center of the leaf there. All right. So now that our leaves are almost done, our painting is almost done. And I think this will make a very nice card to give for Mother's Day or any occasion that you want to make this for. I'm pretty much said Mother's Day because Mother's Day is coming up as of this recording. This Paint It Friday will be May 10th, and I believe Mother's Day is May 12th. I'm just doing a little bit of blending right now. Just you always want to step back and take a look and see where you might need to fix things up. Your painting is not going to look like my painting. And what I'm doing does not mean that's something you need to do. You need to do what works for you in your painting. If you need some things that need smoothed out, then by all means smooth them out. Just have a clean, damp brush, and that way you'll have better success. But I'm just kind of just smoothing it and blending it until I'm satisfied with the end result. So we'll give that another once over. And I do know at my top leaf up there, I had a little boo-boo. So once again, I'm lifting this paint. You see how that just lifted right up? It's a clean, damp brush, and I'm just lifting that right up. I'm going to take my paper towel and dab over it. And I can just lift up where I had that little boo-boo up there. And then just dab it with a paper towel or a tissue or whatever you have. But a paper towel or a tissue I think works the best. And just redefining that area there. And there we go. How about that? I think our flower and our leaves are done. So now I'm going to make sure it's completely dry. And then I'm going to take my eraser because there's still some pencil lines that I can visibly see that were not covered by paint. Now, if they were covered by paint, they're going to be hard to erase. But for those that aren't covered, so while that dries, what I'm doing is I'm practicing painting out the word Happy Mother's Day. To be honest with you, any type of writing on my painting is not my forte. I am not very good with the calligraphy or anything like that. I had to practice first. But if you want to write on your card, you can with your paintbrush. So I just took my, I believe my Indigo paint, and I'm just going to write Happy Mother's Day on there. Because I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this to my daughter-in-law for Mother's Day. As you can see, it is not my thing, but I'm not mad about it. Cross my T there a little bit better. I probably should have left it blank. But if you have fantastic writing, and you know what, you could also do it with, a micron pen, or, a colored, like a colored marker, thin marker that you have that would match your painting. You could do it that way too if you have wonderful handwriting. All right, so now I'm taking the eraser and I'm going to erase any lines that I see around my flowers, and my leaves. If you do this, remember to erase lightly. If you erase too hard, you'll rip your paper. So I'm just lightly going over it just to get any edges and lines that would have been showing. Because I do believe the majority of my other pencil marks that I painted over were covered up. So none of them were showing, which made me happy. Excuse me. So once we get all of that erased, our painting part of it is finished. And also make sure your paint is completely dry if you taken it before you take an eraser to it. All right, so we're going to take the card off, and then we're going to cut along those edges. If you have a paper cutter, I suggest you use that. I actually do have one, but it was not with me at the time. So I'm just going to use my scissors, and we'll cut the edges of those papers, which is why we put those lines there, so we knew where to cut them, because these cards, and I measured it with other greeting card envelope that I had, and they do fit perfectly inside. So you have any extra greeting card envelopes, these will fit inside perfectly. At least mine did. But I'm just cutting carefully because I'm not always the straightest of cutters. And now that we have all that finished, we'll clear the cuttings away. And then we will fold our card in half. So if you cut it straight, all your lines should line up perfectly. And if you have one of those bone creasers, or I forget what they're called, that would be perfect to have. I just don't have one of those, so I just use my fingers. But there we go. There's our finished card, our finished Mother's Day card. So hey, thank you for painting along with me. Oh, and don't forget to sign your work. Thank you for painting along with me for Paint It Friday. I hope you were here for Sketch It Tuesday. I can't wait to see you in 2 weeks for our next Sketch It Tuesday, Paint It Friday. And there we go. There's our finished card. If you are on our Facebook group, I would love to see your cards that you painted. If you are not on our Facebook group, please join us at Watercolor Tutorials and Inspiration. I will have a link down below. And again, thanks for watching. Stay colorful, stay creative, and have fun. Bye-bye.